February 17, 2022, Sheremetyevo Airport, Moscow. Security pulls a 6'9" American basketball star aside. Inside her bag, a couple of vape cartridges that laboratory tests would say contained traces of cannabis oil, legal in parts of the US, illegal in Russia. Within weeks, Washington will label her wrongfully detained. By August, a Russian court will hand down 9 years for drug possession and smuggling. And on December 8, after 293 days behind bars, she'll step onto a tarmac in Abu Dhabi and walk toward freedom in a 1-for-1 prisoner swap for Victor Bout. The notorious Russian arms dealer, a WNBA champion, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, an international pawn. The headlines write themselves, the stakes do not. But this bombshell didn't explode in a vacuum. It landed in the middle of a global crisis and a sport-to-state collision, where an American superstar who spent winters earning a living in Russia suddenly became a cipher for geopolitics. When she finally returned to the WNBA in May 2023 and scored 18 points in her first game back, the box score could not contain the story. What does justice, accountability, and redemption look like when your private mistake becomes a diplomatic flashpoint? And how did a player many regard as one of the best to ever touch the women's game end up at the center of the world's most public negotiation? Brittney Yvette Griner was born on October 18, 1990, in Houston, Texas, the youngest of 4 children in a working-class household. Her father, Raymond, was a retired Harris County sheriff and Vietnam veteran. Her mother, Sandra, worked tirelessly to keep the family together. Life in Houston was not easy. Money was often tight, and Brittney grew up in an environment where discipline and resilience were necessities, not luxuries. From a young age, Brittney was different, not just in height, but in personality. By middle school, she was already well over 6 feet tall, towering above classmates. That height made her a target for bullying. And her deep voice, athletic frame, and later her openness about her sexuality often left her isolated. Brittney would later admit she struggled with self-esteem, questioning where she fit in a world quick to mock her difference. But her family, especially her mother, encouraged her to lean into her uniqueness. At Nimitz High School, she found her sanctuary on the basketball court. Her father, strict and sometimes hard on her, insisted on discipline, which gave her both structure and motivation. Despite moments of tension, especially when Brittney later came out as gay, her family became the foundation she could always return to. By her teenage years, her athletic gifts were undeniable. Coaches noticed not only her height, but also her agility, timing, and instinct for the game. She studied tapes of NBA stars, teaching herself how to dunk by watching YouTube videos of legends like Shaquille O'Neal. At 15, she achieved what few girls her age could. She dunked in a game, instantly putting her on the national radar. Brittney's childhood was marked by struggle, but also resilience. She grew up as the different kid in Houston, mocked for her voice and her frame, yet she turned those same traits into her power. It was in those formative years, between the stern love of her father, the unconditional support of her mother, and the proving ground of Houston gyms, that Brittney Griner forged the toughness she would need for the global stage. At Nimitz High School in Houston, Brittney Griner transformed from a bullied teenager into a national basketball phenomenon. By her senior year, she had not only become a defensive force, blocking shots with ease, but also a highlight reel machine. Capable of dunking with authority, she shattered records, finishing high school with 318 career dunks and 748 blocked shots. Numbers unheard of in girls basketball at the time. ESPN and national scouts began calling her the future of the women's game. Her dominance earned her a scholarship to Baylor University, where she joined coach Kim Mulkey's powerhouse program in 2009. At Baylor, Brittney's 6'9" frame, 7'4" wingspan, and mobility made her unstoppable. She quickly became known for her shot blocking, setting the NCAA record for career blocks with 748, and for bringing the above-the-rim game to women's basketball in a way no one had seen before. Her sophomore year, She made history by leading Baylor to the 2012 NCAA Championship. Capping off a perfect 40-0 season, Griner averaged 23 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 blocks per game, dominating on both ends of the floor. She won the Naismith Player of the Year award, the Wade Trophy, and was widely regarded as the best player in college basketball. Male or female, yet Griner's time at Baylor wasn't without conflict. While she was becoming a national star, she also struggled with her identity. Baylor is a private Christian university with conservative values, and though Brittney came out as gay publicly in 2013, she revealed later that she had felt pressure to remain quiet about her sexuality during her college years. That tension between who she was and what the institution expected of her added another layer of complexity to her journey. In 2013, Brittney declared for the WNBA Draft, where she was the consensus #1 pick. The Phoenix Mercury selected her first overall, officially beginning her professional career. Standing at the intersection of talent and representation, she wasn't just another rookie, she was hailed as the future face of women's basketball. Someone capable of changing how the game was played and perceived. From Houston gyms to Baylor championships, Brittney Griner had proven she was extraordinary. The world stage, however, was about to test her in ways basketball never could. When Brittney Griner entered the 2013 WNBA Draft, expectations were sky high. Selected #1 overall by the Phoenix Mercury, she stepped onto the court as not just a rookie but as the most anticipated player in women's basketball since Lisa Leslie. From her very first game, she made history, dunking twice in her debut, proving that her above-the-rim style could translate to the professional stage. Over the next several seasons, Griner established herself as one of the league's most dominant forces, standing 6 feet 9 inches with a 7 feet 4 inches wingspan. She became nearly impossible to score against in the paint. She quickly collected accolades, multiple All-Star selections, Defensive Player of the Year awards, and league titles in both scoring and shot blocking. Her crowning achievement came in 2014, when she teamed up with Diana Taurasi to lead the Mercury to a WNBA championship. But Griner's impact extended beyond the WNBA. She became a fixture on Team USA, winning 2 Olympic gold medals, 2016 Rio, 2020 Tokyo, and helping the US maintain its global dominance in women's basketball. On the international stage, she brought unmatched size, agility, and flair. For many young girls around the world, she became a symbol of possibility, the proof that women could play the game with the same power, speed, and charisma celebrated in the men's league. Her celebrity also took on a global dimension thanks to her overseas career. Like many WNBA players who earn modest salaries compared to their NBA counterparts, Griner supplemented her income by playing abroad. Russia became her second home in the off-seasons, where she joined UMMC Ekaterinburg, one of Europe's premier women's teams. There, she won multiple EuroLeague titles and was paid over $1 million per season, a stark contrast to the WNBA's salary cap. Off the court, Brittney Griner broke barriers as one of the few openly gay athletes in professional basketball. She used her platform to advocate for LGBTQ+ rights and visibility in sports, often speaking candidly about her struggles and triumphs. In a league celebrated for its inclusivity, she became both a role model and a trailblazer. By the late 2010s, Griner's resume was glittering: WNBA champion, Olympic gold medalist, international superstar, and activist. She wasn't just playing basketball, she was changing its culture. Yet, behind the accolades, there were cracks. Financial necessity kept her returning to Russia each winter, even as geopolitical tensions between Moscow and Washington escalated. It was a decision that seemed practical at the time but would soon catapult her into one of the most dramatic international scandals in sports history. In the eyes of fans, Brittney Griner had already secured her place among the greatest to ever play the game. What no one could have predicted was that her career and her life would soon be defined not by championships or medals, but by the terrifying ordeal of imprisonment in a foreign land. While Brittney Griner's dominance on the basketball court was undeniable, her personal life often played out in the glare of the same spotlight. From her earliest days in the WNBA, she was one of the few openly gay superstars in professional sports, a fact that brought both admiration and scrutiny. In 2013, shortly after being drafted #1 overall, Griner came out publicly as gay. The announcement was groundbreaking. She became one of the first high-profile athletes in basketball to do so at the start of her career. For many, Brittney became a role model, showing young LGBTQ+ athletes that it was possible to live authentically at the highest levels of sport. But openness also invited the media into every chapter of her romantic life. Her most high-profile relationship began with fellow WNBA player Glory Johnson. The pair announced their engagement in 2014, and what followed was a whirlwind of romance, controversy, and turbulence. Just weeks before their wedding in May 2015, both were arrested on charges of domestic violence after an altercation at their Arizona home. Despite the incident, they married soon after, and only a month later, Johnson announced she was pregnant with twins via in vitro fertilization. The marriage, however, quickly unraveled. By June 2015, Griner filed for annulment, citing fraud and duress, though the marriage officially ended in divorce. The saga dominated headlines, overshadowing Brittney's basketball accomplishments, while the league suspended both players for their involvement in the domestic incident. Brittney used the experience as a turning point, later acknowledging mistakes and emphasizing her growth from the ordeal. She also became more vocal about the unique challenges LGBTQ+ athletes face, particularly in the public eye. In 2019, Brittney found love again, this time with Cherelle Watson, whom she met years earlier at Baylor University. Their relationship blossomed, and in 2019, they became engaged. In June 2020, Brittney and Cherelle married in an intimate ceremony. Unlike her previous marriage, this relationship became a source of stability and strength. Cherelle, now a lawyer, has often been described as Brittney's anchor, especially during her darkest days in Russian detention. When Brittney was imprisoned in 2022, Cherelle became the public face of her fight for freedom. She appeared in interviews, pleaded with political leaders, and mobilized public opinion to keep Brittney's case in the spotlight. Her emotional statements, sometimes tearful, always determined, underscored the human cost of the ordeal. When Brittney finally returned home in December 2022, the images of her embracing Cherelle on the tarmac became symbols of resilience, love, and reunion. Through the highs and lows of her personal life, Brittney's relationships reveal a woman unafraid to live openly, even when it brings criticism or pain. From a tumultuous first marriage to a supportive partnership with Cherelle, her love life mirrors her broader journey, complicated, messy, but ultimately defined by resilience and authenticity. On February 17, 2022, Brittney Griner's life took a turn that no championship, no gold medal, and no highlight dunk could have prepared her for, as she arrived at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport to rejoin her Russian club team. UMMC Ekaterinburg. Customs officers flagged her luggage. Inside, they found 2 vape cartridges containing hashish oil, a substance legal in parts of the United States but strictly prohibited under Russian law. What might have been a minor infraction in another country became a geopolitical flashpoint. Just days later, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, igniting the most tense US-Russia relations since the Cold War. Brittney, a high-profile American athlete, was suddenly more than a detainee. She was a bargaining chip in a global standoff. The charges were severe: possession and smuggling of narcotics. Griner admitted in court that she had packed the cartridges by mistake, insisting she had no intent to break Russian law. She even provided medical records showing that cannabis oil had been prescribed for chronic pain. Still, prosecutors pushed for the maximum penalty. The trial, held in Moscow in the summer of 2022, drew international headlines. Photographs of Brittney, 6'9", handcuffed, head bowed as guards led her into court, became haunting symbols of vulnerability. She pleaded guilty in July, hoping for leniency, but on August 4, 2022, the Russian court sentenced her to 9 years in prison. The verdict sparked outrage across the globe. U.S. officials quickly designated her as wrongfully detained, vowing to bring her home. The WNBA dedicated its season to her, with players wearing jerseys emblazoned with her number 42. During the All-Star Game, celebrities, athletes, and politicians united in calls for her release. Still, for months, Brittney languished in a Russian penal colony, isolated, cut off from her family, and fearful she might spend the better part of a decade behind bars. Her imprisonment became one of the most dramatic international sports scandals in history. Commentators debated whether her fame helped or hurt her. Did Russia target her precisely because she was so visible? Or would an ordinary American have faced the same fate? The answer hardly mattered to Brittney, who endured freezing conditions, language barriers, and the mental strain of captivity. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, negotiations began. The US and Russia discussed a possible prisoner swap, with Moscow demanding the release of Victor Bout, a notorious arms dealer nicknamed the Merchant of Death, who was serving a 25-year sentence in the US for months. Talks dragged on. Brittney's wife, Cherelle, campaigned tirelessly, meeting President Biden and keeping the story alive in the media. Finally, on December 8, 2022, the deal was struck. Brittney Griner was freed in exchange for Bout. The images of her walking across the tarmac in Abu Dhabi, tall frame hunched slightly as she shook hands with US officials, were broadcast worldwide. In America, her return was celebrated as a victory, but it was also controversial. Critics argued the US had given up too much, freeing a dangerous arms trafficker for a basketball star. Supporters countered that no American should be left behind. For Brittney, the bombshell scandal was both deeply personal and unbearably public. What began as 2 vape cartridges became an international drama that dominated headlines for nearly a year. The 9-month ordeal left her traumatized but also transformed her into a symbol of resilience, diplomacy, and the precarious intersection between sports and politics. In the eyes of the world, Brittney Griner was no longer just an athlete. She was a reminder that even the most celebrated careers can be derailed in an instant, and that fame offers little protection when caught in the machinery of global conflict. When Brittney Griner's plane touched down in San Antonio on December 9, 2022, the world exhaled. Her release after 293 days in Russian custody was celebrated with vigils, news specials, and emotional reunions. But for Brittney, the return home was not a fairy tale ending. It was the beginning of another challenge, reclaiming her life, her game, and her peace of mind. Physically, Griner had endured months of harsh conditions in a Russian penal colony. She later described how the beds were too small for her 6 feet 9 inches frame, how she was forced to sew uniforms, and how the cold seeped into her bones. Mentally, the ordeal left deep scars. Though grateful for her freedom, she admitted the trauma would take years to process. Still, Brittney made a vow: she would return to basketball. In May 2023, just 5 months after her release, she suited up once more for the Phoenix Mercury in their season opener against the Los Angeles Sparks. The crowd erupted as she stepped onto the court. She scored 18 points, grabbed 6 rebounds, and blocked 4 shots, proving she was still a force to be reckoned with. Teammates and opponents alike embraced her, acknowledging that this was bigger than basketball, it was survival. Her comeback season was emotionally charged. Every game carried the weight of her story. Fans wore shirts reading, "We are BG," and her number 42 became a symbol of resilience. The WNBA, which had kept her name alive throughout her detention, welcomed her as both a returning star and a living reminder of the sport's global vulnerabilities. Off the court, Brittney found her voice as an advocate. She began speaking about the plight of Americans wrongfully detained abroad, promising to use her platform to help others still imprisoned. Her wife, Cherelle Griner, stood by her side, often joining her in interviews to stress the importance of continued diplomatic efforts. Not everyone reacted with unanimous praise. Some critics questioned the prisoner swap, calling it an uneven trade. Others accused her of being careless in the first place. But Brittney chose to focus on gratitude toward those who fought for her release, her teammates who stood by her, and the fans who celebrated her return. By the end of 2023, Brittney had reclaimed her place in the league, even earning a spot on the WNBA All-Star team. While her stats were strong, her impact went beyond numbers. She became an emblem of perseverance, someone who had faced down political machinery and emerged standing tall. Her attempted comeback was not just about resuming a career, it was about rewriting her narrative. No longer just the woman who had been imprisoned abroad, she reasserted herself as Brittney Griner, Olympian, WNBA champion, and survivor. Today, Brittney Griner stands at a crossroads between athlete, activist, and symbol. On the basketball court, she remains one of the most dominant centers in WNBA history. A perennial all-star whose combination of size, skill, and intensity continues to shape how the women's game is played. Her return after nearly a year in Russian captivity was more than a comeback. It was a reclamation of identity, a refusal to let geopolitics erase her legacy. Off the court, Brittney has embraced a new role as an advocate. She and her wife, Cherelle, have vowed to fight for Americans still wrongfully detained overseas, using their platform to raise awareness about cases that often go unnoticed. In interviews, Brittney has spoken candidly about the trauma of imprisonment, the importance of mental health, and the privilege and responsibility of having a voice that the world listens to. Her ordeal also sparked larger conversations about the economics of women's basketball. Many pointed out that Brittney was in Russia in the first place because WNBA salaries are a fraction of NBA earnings, forcing players to seek lucrative contracts abroad. Her story became not only a cautionary tale but also a rallying cry for greater investment in women's sports. Yet, Brittney's legacy is still being written. For some, she is a hero, an athlete who endured the unendurable and returned stronger. For others, she is a polarizing figure, her freedom tied to a controversial prisoner swap that freed one of the world's most infamous arms dealers. The debate ensures her name will never be detached from the politics that defined her darkest year. What is certain is that Brittney Griner is no longer just a basketball player. She is a reminder of how quickly fame and success can collide with forces far beyond one's control. Whether remembered as a champion, a survivor, or a symbol of political gamesmanship, her story has already left an indelible mark on sport and society. Her journey, like her career, is ongoing, unresolved, unfinished, and still unfolding.